After a slow start in the 26 cycle, Missouri adds 3 high school players in just a few days, and most of them are leaning toward potential over production. Let's talk about what it means on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And you know what? For once, it's not the Tigers backing out of a series against a Big Ten school, but apparently turnabout is fair play. I want to talk about the Fighting Illini backing out of a couple bragging rights football games here in the coming season. And also, boy, it sure seems like a March Madness expansion is almost inevitable at this point. And suddenly I just feel incredibly dirty. But you know what? I'm going to start feeling better very soon because this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And you know what? Just a lot of recruiting news on the high school ranks since I last talked with all of you. So let's start there. Let's start with Devyon Hill-Lomax, a wide receiver from Edwardsville, Illinois. Though, are we going to call that St. Louis area? Is that close enough for government work? I'd say it pretty much is. He's an area player. Is he in-state? No, but again, close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades, I suppose. But Hill-Lomax here really strikes me as a high upside prospect and one who is maybe somewhat unpolished at football at this point, as well most high school players are, at least for the college level. But I think in particular here, all 3 of the guys I'm about to talk about here are guys who are high upside prospects. And for as much as Eli Drinkwitz has talked about he's looking for production over potential at this point, well, I think there's some nuance to that statement. And definitely I think what Eli Drinkwitz is looking for is in the freshman class moving forward here in terms of high school recruiting. I think he's looking for one of 2 things, I'm guessing. He's looking for guys that can come in and play immediately, or secondly, guys who are going to come and if they can't play immediately, hey, let's just hope they stick around for a couple of seasons so we can actually profit from the investment that you put into these type of players, to put it that way. And I think Devyon Hill-Lomax is maybe that type of player, contrasted to somebody like Courtney Crutchfield at the position last year, who was certainly a more highly ballyhooed type of recruit, a guy who's going to demand some NIL dollars on the open market. Whereas Devyon Hill-Lomax, while a guy, again, an intriguing combination of athleticism, in my opinion, a good high school basketball player as well, a guy who has reached 6'8" on the high jump, and at 6'4", 180 pounds, that's a pretty intriguing combo. Intriguing enough, he got some looks from home state Illini, from Kentucky, from Iowa State, but again, the big guys, Georgia, Alabama, maybe some of those type of teams weren't kicking the tires just yet. Before the portal and NIL, I honestly thought this is the type of player that Missouri should attack because, simply put, I think if you're in the SEC, you can take guys from Big 12 schools, even good Big 12 schools like Iowa State. You should be able to pluck those guys from the Midwest because the SEC really is that type of selling point. Well, maybe Missouri now is going back to that strategy just a little bit. I don't have a ton of evidence for that particular perspective, but just a guess, trying to figure out the constantly changing landscape here. And obviously, since the landscape is constantly changing, this is going to be coming up here the first season of revenue sharing. Well, obviously your recruiting strategies are going to have to change constantly as well. I find all of that to be very interesting without a doubt. So maybe somebody like Devyon Hill-Lomax fits really well, the Edwardsville, Illinois product with really high upside. Again, 6'4", with athletic ability. That type of player, usually, if they're going to be a more finished product, then obviously they're more likely to go to the Ohio States and Georgias of the world. This is an interesting guy who maybe Missouri can get to hang around for a couple years and enjoy the fruits of that labor. Similarly, in another Illinois product here, by the way, this is turning into an Illinois-heavy show here, I'm beginning to realize. But Chicago product Maxwell Warner, a running back, 5'10", 185 pounds. I'd say that's very much the prototypical Eli Drinkwitz sized running back. Notably, the Tigers were this young man's first Power 4 offer, so that held a lot of weight with him, I think. Again, back to my point there, if there's somebody from the Chicagoland area who maybe is getting poked around a little bit, starting to rise up the ranks a little bit, if you are indeed the first Power 4 team, certainly, much less an SEC team that offers, that's going to really carry a lot of weight. And just from the little bit I've been able to see from Warner, I think he's got plenty of speed, good cutback abilities. Maybe if I just had to go for a quick comparison, one that this may be some recency bias here because, well, this was the most recent Missouri starting running back. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Nate Noel, just in how he runs, which does make sense. Missouri definitely has a type, and it's the outside zone type of player, and Warner is potentially a guy I think can definitely fit that scheme for sure. Also visited Northwestern and Illinois earlier in 2025. Of course, the home state Big Ten schools there. Then a Miami offer. That's University of Miami, by the way. The Canes, that is, in Florida, came earlier this month, but Missouri got him on campus on June 6th. And, well, even though it took a few weeks, the Tigers were his final visit that I've seen reported. And they closed the deal, and I really do think, hey, that University of Miami there late in June is an interesting thing to note there. This could be a young man who's a late riser here, or maybe just a later option now that maybe some of the absolute elite running backs are off the board. But to me, Warner is a guy, at the very least, who fits what Missouri likes to do in their running game. And finally, one more player Mizzou got, in fact, the first Michigan area player since Darius Robinson's class back in 2019. This time it's Khalief Canty, who basically came down to a Missouri and Michigan State battle, although Bill Belichick and Jordan Hudson threw their hats into the ring as well with an official visit. But Khalief Canty, that I say is measurable, 6'5", 305, Detroit area player. Unclear what position he'll play in college, if he'll play inside or maybe kicks out to tackle, maybe even be a center as well. He seems to have tried his hand at all of those positions, at least at some point in camps in high school throughout the process. But, you know, the good news is he plans to graduate early, he said, so a guy who may well try to get on the field early. He's certainly got the size for it, no doubt about that. So another athletic, big body for Brandon Jones, Missouri's offensive line coach, to mold. I'll just say this, it's really difficult to project forward for offensive linemen in high school. They just usually aren't asked to do much other than plow forward and maul people in the running game. And in terms of pass blocking, well, it's just very limited the amount of times that they're in an obvious passing situation against a defensive lineman that is anywhere near their physical level. So, again, I think what you do if you're Missouri, and really, especially Missouri, I think you just go for measurables. You go for the elite, high upside bodies and hope you've got the right offensive line coach, which I believe, especially in the running game, Missouri does, and Brandon Jones. So, again, Khalief Canty, an interesting, big, athletic body for the Tigers to mold. And since I've been talking about the state of Illinois, well, the Fighting Illini have pulled a Gary Pinkel, though not a full Gary Pinkel, maybe just like 25%, like a 0.25 Pinkel. I'll explain what exactly I'm talking about in just a little bit here. But first, I want to talk about Monarch Money, because you ever wished managing your money felt a little easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can, whether you're just growing your savings or building up for an actual big purchase. Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It really is like having your own personal CFO. And Monarch Money is much more than a budgeting app. We're talking a complete financial center to track all of your accounts, investments, spending in one place. And speaking of all those accounts, I mean, we're not just you're talking about different emails, all kinds of stuff that you sign up for. One of the surprising things I noticed when I signed up for Monarch is that I had some redundant subscriptions, a couple of streaming services that I had sort of let lapse, but then they renewed, but I had signed up elsewhere. Who wants to pay double for something? Well, that made me feel a little silly, but thankfully, Monarch Money was here to help me take control of my finances. So use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Well, for those of you who may be too young or just simply don't remember what I was referring to there, the full Gary Pinkel, well, what Gary Pinkel did, one of the first things he did, I should say, upon arriving in Columbia was to cancel a planned 4-game series with the Iowa Hawkeyes. And, well, there had been a lot of hard feelings between Iowa and Missouri for about a better part of a century or so at that point, and Missouri backing out of that long-awaited 4-game series there probably didn't exactly ease a lot of those wounds, I wouldn't say. But basically, Gary Pinkel didn't care. His whole thing was, I'm going with a new strategy. It's called beefing up the wins. I want to go the opposite of beefing up with the non-conference schedule and make it a little easier, quite honestly. He thought, rack up those wins and the recruits will come, all that good stuff. Bill Snyder of Kansas State was definitely a champion of that strategy as well. Well, to that point, again, Illinois has not gone the full Gary Pinkel here, meaning this is according to the Illinois Inquirer. This is from Jeremy Werner. Illinois Athletic Director Josh Whitman announces the 8-game football series with Missouri has been reduced to a 6-game series with the Fighting Illini and Missouri. Games in 2026 and 2032 have been canceled. So originally it was going to be 2 4-game stints from 26 to 29 and then 32 to 35. But once again, that 26 game has been canceled and that 32 game has been canceled as well. From the Illini's perspective, their thing is, well, basically, Illinois in 2026 had 11 Power 4 games scheduled, including their 9-game Big Ten schedule, Missouri as well. And basically, their athletic director said that that was untenable, and they will replace the 2026, what was going to be a game in Champaign, a home game for Illinois. Well, that's going to replace with another home game. They have yet to find that opponent. Here's betting it's going to be somebody like UMass, who is an easy win, at least in theory, for Brett Bielema and his squad. Now, obviously, I've been a little tongue-in-cheek here, making fun of the Fighting Illini, as you would expect me to do against one of our big rivals. But I will say, from Missouri's perspective, I'm guessing they're not exactly crying to have the 2026 Illinois home game taken off the schedule, because in 2026, not only were the Tigers scheduled to travel to Illinois, but the Tigers are scheduled to travel to Lawrence, Kansas as well. So having 2 Power 4 road games in addition to Missouri's SEC schedule in 2026. Hey, maybe that's a fun schedule from a fan's perspective, but I think from Eli Drinkwitz's perspective, he probably wouldn't have minded putting an easier win on the schedule and going more of the Gary Pinkel route himself. Let's put it that way. So a tiny bit disappointing here, I would say, if you're a Missouri fan. But from my perspective, it's understandable both from Missouri and Illinois' perspective. Again, slightly disappointing, but hey, we're still going to get 6 games between these teams over the next decade or so, and there is talk that, well, maybe some of those games could be moved off campus to St. Louis or another location. I have to admit, I don't know what that other location would be necessarily, unless Missouri would be interested in playing in the new Soldier Field, whatever the new Chicago Bears football stadium, I believe is going to be opening up in the next few years or so. If that's something that Missouri's interested in, I could potentially see that being an interesting location. A lot of Chicago alums in the Chicagoland area as well. But Kansas City, for example, I can't really see that. I don't know that Illinois is going to agree to that. I just don't necessarily see that. So to me, it's either St. Louis or Chicago, or likely just on campus. But if that's the talk, those are the 2 locations I could see. And by the way, yesterday, this is just kind of a personal story, but related to the Mizzou football team. I was at the golf course on the putting green yesterday when all of a sudden none other than Eli Drinkwitz asked me to take a picture of him and his fivesome yesterday. Among those players, well, as Eli was calling it, the quarterback masters yesterday. So you had Bo Prabula, Sam Horn, and the true freshman Matt Zollers teeing it up with Eli. And also, I believe Blair Murphy, the recent Columbia mayoral candidate. I believe that's who that person was. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong there. But anyway, I took that picture. Eli Drinkwitz put it out on his X feed, and I have to admit, when I took the picture, there was a few minutes where I was a little nervous and thought, did I blow the picture here? For the simple reason that I did something weird, which I never do when taking a picture. I did okay, here we go, 1, 2, 3, except instead of just doing 1, 2, 3, I go, all right, on M-I-Z on 3, and I go 1, 2, 3, and Drinkwitz dutifully gives me his signature M-I-Z, which was a great moment for me as a fan, obviously. But honestly, after I did that, I thought, ooh, that was a bit of a miscue there. I could have possibly gotten Drinkwitz saying something. Did I mess up the timing? So that was a very nervous 45 minutes for this podcaster, let me tell you. So I was relieved to see that indeed the picture turned out great. Everybody had a normal look on their face. Drinkwitz looking quite handsome, I have to say. And even Bo Prabula, I thought, looking extremely, extremely handsome. Okay. Have I gotten weird enough on this podcast yet? Frankly, I don't think so. I've got to get a little bit weirder, including an NCAA tournament that has 70 or more teams in it. I'm sorry, that particular Rubicon into the 70s, that's just a tough one for me. So I want to talk more about the future of the NCAA tournament. Plus, speaking of the postseason, how about the odds for Mizzou football to make the college football playoff? Get to all that in just a minute. But you know what, guys? You've probably heard about Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. And unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes. And if the traditional options have not worked for you, well, Rugiet might be the answer. More than 150,000 men have already made the switch. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet website for full safety information. So if you're curious, according to my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, Missouri's odds to make the college football playoff, yes, is plus 590, meaning if you bet $100, you would win $590. So about 6-1 there for Missouri to make the college football playoff. The opposite, no, is minus 950, meaning you would have to bet $950 to win 100. So Vegas, or my friends at FanDuel, I should say more specifically, not feeling super confident on Mizzou football making the playoff this season. But on the basketball side, no odds for Missouri to make March Madness next season. But obviously, Missouri's basketball team has a heck of a lot better shot than that, when in fact, 12 teams is a heck of a lot fewer than 68. But if you don't think 68 is enough, and Dennis Gates is certainly one of those people, well, it's good news for you, because according to Pete Thamel, the decision on whether or not to expand the NCAA men's and women's, by the way, basketball tournaments for 2026 is expected to come in the next few weeks. So this will be for the upcoming college basketball season. The expansion would be no more than 76 schools. The NCAA remains in talks with its media partners. So it seems like if I'm reading this correctly, it sure seems like the basic structure of the old school 64 bracket is going to remain intact here. But we're just going to add more of the play-in games. The first four is now going to become the first 12, I suppose. That'll be it. If they go to 76, it'll then be the first 12, right? First four games, whatever. Now I'm confusing myself with the math. I guess it would be the first 8, wouldn't it? Yeah, whatever. Regardless, the point here is that, to me, just crossing into that psychological 70s, it's just a little bit tough for me. I just don't know who is dying for more of those play-in games, by the way. Are those things so highly rated that people are just going, yes, give me more of them? Because I think there's a real risk that the first 4 that already exist, well, now you're just going to water them down to the point where none of those games actually mean anything. I think if you're trying to recreate the start of Thursday and Friday and the tournament, I just don't think you can recreate that. This just seems like a money grab here that is a short-term win, I'm sure, in terms of the dollars and cents, but long-term, I'm not sure that it is a win in terms of dollars and cents, simply because you're watering down what is already a slightly watered-down product. To me, the question will also be, well, who gets these spots? Is it going to be more mid-major teams, or is it going to be more mid-majors? In other words, major teams that are middling in the Big Four of college basketball. That would be my question. The high majors of college basketball, I suppose I should say. We don't necessarily use the Big Four language that we use in football for basketball, but that is going to be a big question. Is this just going to be a bunch of teams that are 2 games under 500 in the SEC? They're going to be added to the mix? Or are we talking about teams like Bradley and Drake, those type of teams that maybe are into the mix? I think most of the people who like the Cinderella stories would prefer the Cinderellas to get more of those spots. But again, what do the dollars and cents say that's going to happen? I'd say it'll be more of a 50-50 type mix in terms of those extra at-large spots, if I had to guess anything. Frankly, I'm glad Missouri has never played in the play-in game in their history, but obviously this expansion means that inevitability becomes more and more likely with each and every year. So for a whole bunch of reasons, not really in favor of expanding the tournament, but at least it'll just be watering down the play-in game portion more than the actual bracket itself. So I guess this isn't a total disaster, but I don't know. It's one of those things that seems like you're flirting with a bit of disaster for not much of a payoff. So ultimately, I don't think it's worth it. I suppose reasonable people can certainly disagree with me there. But hey, thanks for watching and listening to Locked On Mizzou once again and making it your first listen. Speaking of reasonable people, easy for me to say, check out The Portal with Brian Smith. He's got the latest rumors, portal entries, signings, and of course his scouting reports as well. Be the most informed fan by watching The Portal on YouTube or listening wherever you get audio podcasts. So until next time, I'm John Miller, and thanks again for listening to Locked On Mizzou.